Welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. Are you over 40 and ready to truly thrive? Well, on this podcast, we go deep on ways to thrive across the 5 pillars of midlife: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. I'm Brandee Borges, midlife advocate, life coach, and your host. Subscribe now and get ready to thrive. Brandee Brown, welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast.
Thank you so much, Bernie. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to have you here for many reasons, one of which is you are a BB and I am a BB.
Agreed.
And I think it's the first time ever in more than 200 episodes on the Midlife Fulfilled podcast that I've had a BB on. So I'm excited, but actually, I'm very excited just to talk to you. You have a wealth of experience and wisdom and insights that I've invited you to discuss here today. Just a little tiny bit about your background, because I'm sure you'll fill in a few other details along the way. You've got more than 30 years experience. And I have to say, Brandee, you must have started when you were 2 years old, because your
I
youthful
wish.
appearance would not tell me you've got more than 30 years experience in career and leadership roles. You worked for a number of companies, and probably the one that you spent the most time in was Comcast. And
Yes.
you've just developed a whole wealth of knowledge along the way. And now you're harnessing that knowledge, that wisdom, those insights into this concept that you call coming off mute. And that's what
Yes.
really motivated me to bring you on the podcast, because I think in the little bit that I know, I think this is something that a lot of people who listen to the Midlife Fulfill podcast will benefit from understanding. So let's begin with, what do you mean by coming off mute?
I love the question and I love the inspiration behind coming off mute. I'm actually going to tie this back to midlife fulfilled because when you reached out to me, I instantly connected with the fact that all of my journey throughout my career has been a learning point, learning moments, if you will. And so, what I love about coming off mute, that's really a celebration of my midlife fulfilled. Coming off mute is not only a workshop that I have and facilitate through my organization, Magnify Success, but it is also the announcement of a launch book that will take place in 2025. And what coming off mute means to me, or if I can really add a bit of color,
Yeah,
is
please
there
unpack
were,
it.
yes, please, thank you. There were many moments in my early life, adolescent, leading into early adulthood, where I'd experienced trauma. Some have heard me present about this, and to avoid triggering others, if I can simplify the terms to not take us down that road, I will preface it as a bloodline bruise. And I feel like that resonates with most anyone who understands those two terms. That connects to the people that are, in not only in your community, but within your family unit, within your bloodline, that have in some way, shape, or form caused trauma. And for me, it started at a very early age and continued into early adulthood. And sharing that trauma with my most trusted, people in my family and life that wanted to protect and guard those that created those instances for me caused me to shut down and caused me to go on mute. And that training, where I'm going to call it training, that training from my home life carried with me into my career. And it's truly beautiful at this point in my life to understand and be able to share my story, to essentially come off mute and to inspire others to do the same, but to understand how much more impactful you are as a leader when you can amplify your voice. And there are so many instances that bring us to that space where we're silenced. And so I really want to be able to highlight the journey in my life and to support others who've gone through the same and help them find and establish their version of success.
So thank you for sharing the context, the background, and what you mean by coming off mute. So I've got a million questions. So the first
Of
question
course.
that I'll start with is, when did you realize that you needed to come off mute?
Mm. I'm going to say I had a number of instances in career that were repetitious. And for a while, we never want to admit that we are the cause of our circumstances. And that can be at the hand of bad leadership, that can be at the hand of circumstances and situations that continue to occur. And they may not be favorable to the individual, but there's a reason that they're happening. And so I was about 45 when I recognized there was a pattern and treatment of me. I am a people pleaser. I am a yes person. I am one who will pour into others and give to others before they will give to me. And those are also trained behaviors by someone who's been taught not to care for themselves, not to speak up, not to acknowledge when something's uncomfortable. And so I became this leader who was in circumstances, it didn't matter where I was, but especially in a professional setting, I recognized over the years that I was in these situations because I didn't know how to amplify and how to shut them down. I didn't know how to stand tall. I didn't feel confident and comfortable saying, this is not okay, or this is okay. It doesn't have to be a tough situation. I really needed to know who I was in the room and that I was making an impact, good, bad, or indifferent. So I want to say right around that age 45, I was in a pivotal moment in my career at Comcast Corporation. I truly loved being a part of that organization for 22 years and developing as a young professional into a more seasoned professional. And though I encountered a number of circumstances that were what I will call now the assignment, I understand the assignment was to help empower me to prepare to come off mute.
Fascinating. Okay. So, as I said, I've got a million questions. So, my next question is more about when you came to the realization. You mentioned the word leadership or leader.
Yes.
Were
Yes.
you in a leadership role? And it's really a two-part question. Is this something that you think anybody should embrace if they're in a situation where they feel like they need to come off mute, regardless of whether they're in a leadership role in an organization, which can be in the career, the workplace, but also can be outside the workplace, right? It can be in a church community, it can be in a local community where
Absolutely.
you're in a leadership role, lots of different ways to be in a leadership role. But Brandee, I also want to bring into that the concept of self leadership. I don't want to exclude the fact that we all have to
Mm.
lead our own lives and lead the decisions that we make and lead the actions that we take. So I'm expanding the definition of leadership and I'm really inviting you into that conversation in the context of coming off mute.
I love that you're taking me there because I don't know that I'd really tapped into the opportunity of self leadership. As you say, it's, I'm sure, happening subconsciously. And what I love about the conversation now is, again, Midlife Fulfilled is all about unpacking. Can I use your words? A lot of things that are happening as I approach the age of 50. I am just in a space where I recognize all of the work that I do. And when you say leadership roles, I can think about a number of boards that I hold advisory positions on or executive positions in different organizations. My contributions of giving back also put me in a space of leadership. And when I think about my journey, if I can even go back 10, 20 years, I couldn't see myself in those rooms. I was always the person who was so excited to celebrate a leader to watch holding the stage, or a president or vice president of an organization, or supporting a president and vice president, and couldn't see myself there. And I believe that had a lot to do with this muted version of Brandee. And now I think about having this moment of self-reflection, and I shouldn't say moment because it's a journey, right? This is going to take some time, and I continue to learn and grow how to be this leader who shows up in spaces that emulates what coming off mute looks like. And I will say that is, a powerful exercise, that should be taking place throughout your life in I'm going to say personal relationships, and I'm going to come back and say in all relationships. To me, every interaction is a relationship. That's with your children, that's with your spouse, that's with your siblings, that's with your community. And so when you think about how you can be a disservice to someone on the receiving end of communication by not allowing them to hear all of the gifts that you have to share. There's so much that we're missing in community, and even meeting yourself and talking to other leaders in community. I am now witnessing the superpowers in me by simply being myself. And it's unfortunate that that was hidden, that that was brushed under the rug, that that was ingrained in me, that my voice wasn't powerful and it didn't hold weight. And now I am seeing myself move throughout community. And I will say, I feel the weight. I feel heavy in community. And it's really, really a blessing to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So part of what I'm hearing, Brandy, is that you have had an awakening. Now that's
absolutely.
the word that I'm using, whether or not it's a word you would use, but that's kind
I
of
love it.
okay. So
Hmm.
that's my
Yes,
interpretation. Okay. So back to my million questions. My next one is, and these are all coming to me in the moment. These are not pre-planned questions. And
perfect.
that is,
As it should.
did this awakening happen because of someone or maybe more than one individual? Or was it more about
Mm.
the way your life has unfolded that brought you to this awakening?
You know, you bring up a point that I have had to sit with, and it's actually will be revealed and reflected upon, if you will, in my book. I am extremely protective of the brands of others. And that was one thing that I'll stitch this together in a moment, but I didn't understand that I was so protective of others because I was forced to protect when I shouldn't have been. However, that curse has also become a blessing because I am extremely protective of how I care for everyone's brand. And in my mind, and this may not resonate with everyone, I feel everyone has their own opportunity to tarnish and damage their brand. And that should never be up to me. So the reason I say that is because now bringing it back to your question, the moment in time, I remember it vividly, that allowed me to see how I was being controlled by the volume being turned all the way down. There was an instance being planned behind the scenes, uh, amongst family. And so here's me protecting brand. I won't go into the people, and you can put the story together as you will. But it involved coordinating an excursion with my daughter. And this family is not as close to my daughter, and just doesn't know her the way I do. And inadvertently, I was included in this message that began this planning and taking her on this trip and all these things. And I should be celebrating, right? They're trying to take my daughter on a trip. This is family. And I cried. I was so hurt because I thought, how have you never considered me, the relationship we have, and this person that is now the closest person to me? And you want to move with this person and you've not considered me. You've been planning behind the scenes, and I was accidentally included in the conversation. It was this moment that I had the courage to share. Of course, it was inspired by my daughter. um, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. I dislike this. And I was able to acknowledge not only that moment of pain for me, because it took me back to instances that were much more traumatic. And I was able to unpack. I'm gonna borrow that. I won't say steal it from you. I'm gonna borrow that from you, Bernie, because I really like it and I like gifts.
Feel free. I did
But
not invent
I
the word.
am it's amazing. I'm gonna go with it. Um, you know, that allowed me to really unpack all that life had offered me through experiences and through circumstances leading up to that moment. And though I was breaking down and I was in fear, sharing, this was not comfortable, this was not right, this was not good, that was my break free moment. And when I say I went beyond coming off mute, I've said this before too, but I really like the Little John song, Turn It Down for What? I don't know if you've heard it, and if you haven't, you got to listen. But
Okay.
um, it is about the volume being full blast, and it was truly that moment in my life. And again, I think I stitch it back to earlier in conversation. I was about 45 years old when that happened, and as I get ready to approach 50, I couldn't be more proud of acknowledging who I am, what I've experienced, and how that is really going to fuel my future, because none of my circumstances define me. They are moments in life that
Hmm.
help me define what purpose, what walk, and what future look like. I also said that to say, I believe I was truly on mute for a reason. For me, everything is divinely connected. And I needed to have this moment of inspiration, no matter how painful it was, to understand that as my midlife is fulfilled, this is truly the point in time that I'm prepared mentally, physically, emotionally to move forward and receive who I am and share that openly to come off mute the right way.
Okay. So my
Yeah.
next thought, given the context you just provided there, Brandy, is that,
Mhm.
and you just said this, you used the word divine. It sounds like what I'm hearing is that it was a God ordained experience, to your point, a
Mhm.
divine
Absolutely.
incident. And it also seems to me it's given you purpose, which it is directly connected to it being a God ordained experience. You now have this purpose that is crystal clear, and you're taking this to other people who need to hear this message.
Yes, you are so right. I am a very spirit-led person, and certainly for me, God ordained. For others, it's whatever spiritual connection that they have to a higher power entity. But for me, that's my language, and so I recognize that nothing happens by accident. And this is when I began to pay attention to those divine designs in my life. You know, that the text message that I was included in as a group inadvertently was received in the moment I was prepared to stand tall. I've had so many, how many people have in it, inadvertent text messages, especially with family or friends. And, you send the wrong message. But for this to come at this point in time, it just couldn't have been more inspirational to me to
Yeah.
really pay attention to the design and the way my life has moved, to pay attention to pain that I could instantly translate into purpose. And that's essentially what I was doing with that.
Have you ever wondered, what if you had had that experience, say 20 years younger? You shared a few times that you were
Mm,
45 when this happened. What if you were 25 when this happened? Because you said that the origin of this stems back to your childhood.
it does. It
So,
does.
what if this had happened when you were 25? And let me put a little more context to this question. While I'm asking you this question, Brandy, I also want to challenge the listener
Mm,
who is listening now and maybe thinking the same thing. You had this experience at age 45, and have you ever been tempted to say, why did it take so long? Why couldn't have I had this experience 20 years
mhm.
ago? And the last 20 years would have been so different for me. And instead of beating ourselves up with that question, instead, recognizing, as you said, it was a divine experience. It happened when it happened. Those of us
Yes,
who are believers know that God's timing is always perfect. So while
always right.
you may think 45 is later than you want it to be, but have you been tempted to think that way at all?
So, yes and no. I believe I was given a number of opportunities to think, react, respond, acknowledge in the same way. Not, maybe not the same instance. Definitely not a text message 25 years ago. We were pretty light on text messaging.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I was given a number of instances that would have allowed me the opportunity to speak up, to say, this doesn't feel right. I don't like this. And I believe as I would begin to speak, there would be, to me, a more powerful voice that was speaking, and maybe not elevating, not in a direct or abrasive, aggressive approach, just enough, if you will, in the conversation to make me feel like I wasn't confident enough to move forward. I didn't have the words, I didn't have the strength, I didn't have the backbone really to stand taller, to understand that someone is rebuttaling. What's a good word? I came up with that one. Just I didn't make it up. But I was rebuttaling, or someone was rebuttaling, and that didn't mean I couldn't still respond. I feel like that was something I was also ingrained in me. What I say trained and taught because your behaviors are really infused in you from an early age, and they just continue to mature.
Right.
So if I can think back to that, even a response meant that's the last words that should come from you. Being on mute is such a powerful, powerful manipulative or manipulation tool. And whether it's unconscious or conscious from someone who, is persons that are creating this instance for others, you lose the ability to understand how to continue a conversation. Communication is broken. There are just so many instances that reveal power and loss or lack of power from the person that's experiencing this volume turned down. So I bring it back to, and I'm looking down because I think about all of these moments. They kind of all go in my head together. If I could have gone back in time and reacted, I had moments in my teens, in my 20s, in my 30s, and the ability to address again was divinely designed for me to be in a space where a rebuttal didn't make me feel caught off guard. I had more to respond to, and I can attribute all of that to experience, life,
Mhm.
maturity. I needed all of those things. I needed to develop. I needed to observe amazing people. And, it was my career at Comcast, 22 years of career where I could observe the best of the best, in my opinion. I saw fatherhood, motherhood, sibling relationships, professional relationships. I saw relationships I didn't care for. And I saw those that I fell in love with. And it was those that were most harmful. Think about that. That created what Comcast called it, framed at one time, I remember, moments of misery. Those moments stand out to you most. And what that inspired in me before I knew who I was today was, how do I not create that type of memorable moment for someone? How do I make it so that the moment that's memorable is excellent? Or, as I might say, is magnificent.
Mm.
So I appreciate that question. I don't get to think that way a lot. So yeah, you're taking me on a journey here. I appreciate it.
So, okay, so I want to come back to something you said. You said it a
Mhm.
couple of times, and before you said it, I was thinking about this. So you kind of you helped me get there, and that is the word confidence. You also use the
Yes.
word maturity, and it seems to me that both of those are in play here. That when
Mhm.
you had this divine experience at age 45, you had both the confidence and the maturity to come off mute, and maybe you can unpack that a little bit. You've spoken to it a
Yeah.
little bit, but I want to specifically go there. And
Mhm.
and Brandy, not just because of your story, but again, I'm thinking of the listener and what might they be, might what might someone listening to this be dealing with where they need to think of their own
Mm.
confidence and their own maturity to come off mute.
Goodness, what a great opportunity to really reflect on maturity and confidence. I just want to thank you for the question. It's something I don't know that we all sit with openly. And so if I'm thinking of the listener and even connecting that to myself, maturity only progresses in our life. It only evolves and gets better. And I can't say that someone who's experienced, you know, various different things isn't more mature or less than I was at 25 or even 45. But what I will say is that life experiences, whether that was loss, I've suffered tremendous loss, including children. I have dealt with illness in my life on multiple occasions with different diagnoses that have taken me on very unique journeys. I've dealt with interesting circumstances in workplace that have been, as I will go back to, the assignment. All of these things were the assignment. And what I can say is that each of these instances and prevailing, right? My resilience, my celebration of a new day is what gives me the confidence to be able to stand tall in new circumstances because I can look at what I've overcome. I can look at what I've survived. I can look at where I've triumphed in instances where maybe I shouldn't have. I remember being very, very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and not knowing what it was like to think about reaching teen years or reaching 21 years of age. Like that just wasn't in my mind because of what my circumstances were. And so if you think about moving forward and just really being able to celebrate each day, what you've overcome, again, how you've matured, the fact that you survive, thrive, move forward is another notch on that maturity belt. And so every day, I am becoming more and more mature, and I'm also becoming more and more confident. And my confidence only comes from when I fall and get right back up. And believe me, I got a number of bruises and scrapes and scratches, and my knees are discolored. I fall a lot, and yet I can celebrate that. I absolutely appreciate how pain is translated into purpose.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
So very, very inspiring. I've thoroughly
Thank you.
enjoyed this conversation. And the one thing I'll add to that before we get to a wrap point here is that, sometimes we need, speaking generally, and also speaking for myself vulnerably, sometimes we need someone in our life to help us
Mm,
understand the
yes.
maturity that we
Okay.
have and the confidence that we have, just by being a shoulder to lean on and maybe a positive voice in our ear with some words of encouragement. And so, again, I'm speaking to the listener now. Maybe you have someone in your life that you can positively influence, or maybe you're in need of that positive
Mm,
influence, whichever way it may be. I think any one of us might be in need of that. And your story,
yes.
Brandy, is very inspiring, very encouraging. And I thank you for not just sharing it here today on this episode of the Midlife Fulfilled podcast, but you're called to do this now in the world with your book and your workshops and your business that's really taking this message out to help others. So where can people connect with you and just learn more about all that you've got going on and get into your world?
Definitely connect with me. You can follow my website, magnify-success.com. I'm also found on LinkedIn, Magnify Success, as well as Brandee Brown.
And Brandy, I'll point out to the
Yes.
listener who may not be watching on video, you spell your name Brandee,
Yes. And brown, just like the color.
just like the color. There you
And I
go.
celebrate that BB right along with you, Bernie.
All right. Well, BB, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm
Thank you.
confident that it's been an inspiration to many. And I just thank you and congratulations for the work that you're doing. You are making an impact. Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you, Bernie.